Welcome to Service Learning 101, your guide to the essentials. In this podcast, you will be introduced to the basic elements of service learning pedagogy. If you are interested in learning more, there are podcasts that address the different elements of service learning. For instance, if after viewing this podcast, you want more information on constructing critical reflection assignments, there is a podcast tailored specifically to that topic. For now, let's start with an overview. Service Learning 101. When defining service learning, it is important to first define what it is not. Service learning is not a standalone volunteer experience. Service learning is an academic pedagogy, a method of teaching, a method of learning. Just as you integrate lectures, films, group projects, or research papers into your course, you integrate service learning as a teaching and a learning tool. It is this academic grounding of service learning that sets it apart from a purely volunteer experience. The American Association of Community Colleges states, "Service learning combines community service with academic instruction, focusing on critical reflective thinking and personal and civic responsibility. It is the combination of your curriculum, the students' work in the community that creates a service learning experience." Also from the American Association of Community Colleges, service learning involves students in activities that address community-identified needs while developing their academic skills and commitment to their community. This podcast briefly discusses each element contributing to a viable service learning experience. Those elements are your curriculum and your specific course learning objectives, forming and maintaining partnerships with community organizations, assignments that foster critical thinking skills, known commonly as reflection assignments, and finally, the ultimate focus of service learning, personal and civic responsibility. Let's get started. Instructors new to service learning can get hung up on the logistics of service and community work. Those are valid concerns that are certainly dealt with in the process of reconstructing a course, but before you begin, always remember, service learning is just another way to reach your course learning outcomes. Service learning is an experiential form of teaching and learning, sharing many similarities with other active learning strategies. Review your course learning objectives and ask yourself, which objectives can be met by service work in the community? What community needs could be met by the skills my students are learning? What experiences might my students have outside the classroom that will reinforce the course material? The community, in other words, becomes a living text. Much like studying the textbook and attending your lectures, students' work in the community should enhance course content and learning outcomes. There are 3 key points to remember when considering community partnerships. First, you must select organizations, or you guide your students to select organizations, that meet your course learning objectives, as mentioned in the previous slide. Either the mission of the organization, the population they serve, the specific projects your students will engage in, or all of these considerations should speak to your learning outcomes. For example, if you teach a geriatric nursing course and an outcome is that students will understand the specific health concerns of an elderly population, a hospice is an appropriate community partnership, whereas tutoring in an elementary school is not. Second, the work of the students in this partnership must meet community-identified needs. The fact that the needs are identified by the community is absolutely essential. For example, your students may choose to partner with Crossroads Urban Center, a nonprofit organization serving low-income and disabled citizens in downtown Salt Lake City. After they spend the semester organizing a canned food drive, they discover that what is really needed by that community is a donation of underwear and bus passes. Finally, it is important that we treat community organizations with respect and as true partners in the learning process. We cannot view community organizations simply as placement sites for our students. With regard to these partnerships being mutually beneficial, Your students benefit from the work they are doing because the curriculum comes alive. Your classroom benefits from the new breadth and depth of discussion and students' engagement with the material. And our community partners benefit from having their self-identified needs met and the capacity of their organization enhanced. Service learning scholars Hatcher and Bringle state that critical reflection is the intentional consideration of an experience in light of particular learning objectives. In the service learning field, we use interchangeably the terms critical reflection, critical thinking, critical reflective thinking. You get the idea. Service learning is an academic tool for teaching and learning. It is the act of critical reflection that puts the learning in service learning. Without intentionally structured assignments and guided class discussions that apply critical thinking skills to the service experience, students are not service learners. They are volunteers. Reflection assignments serve as the evaluative, graded measure of students' knowledge. As the American Association of Community College states, reflection is intended to develop students' academic skills. Keep in mind these best practices as you structure your reflection assignments. Remember that reflection assignments connect the service experience to your curriculum and to your course objectives, as well as to the larger concept of civic responsibility. Reflection, in other words, critical thought about the experience, should occur before, during, and after the service. If students only reflect once the experience is finished, we not only miss the opportunity to make any corrections needed to the experience, but we lose a very valuable opportunity to facilitate students' growth and thoughts about their work. If all we ask students is, "Tell me about your service learning experience," we cannot assume that students will give us more than a travel log of basic facts. In general, most students will report, "I went to the food bank, I talked to Jose, I called Sally, but she wasn't there." Remember that we want students to reflect on their service experience as it relates to course content and course learning objectives, also as their service relates to the larger concept of civic responsibility. Without focused questions and statements to which they respond, few students will make the connections we need them to make. An example of a well-constructed prompt would be to take a provocative statement from the textbook and ask students to tell you how that claim is either supported or discredited by their own experience in the community. At its best, service learning is transformative. Assignments should be challenging and provocative. We want students to leave their comfort zone, challenge their norms, question their prejudice, and examine worldviews. In other words, we want them to think critically. Over the course of the semester, reflection assignments should gradually move students from micro to macro thinking. Move students from a discussion of the personal impacts of their service to the impact their service has on the local community, perhaps the impact on the state or nation, and ultimately, what impact might their service have on global systems. Ask them how their sense of self within a community setting has changed or not changed because of this experience. This micro to macro progression leads directly to the concept of civic responsibility. Ideally, service learning experiences produce thoughtful, concerned citizens who engage with their community for the benefit of the greater good, long after the course is over. Students should be instructed to reflect on civic responsibility and its dynamic definition and practices. We'll talk more about civic responsibility in a moment. Finally, it is a common misconception that students receive a grade for volunteering. Students should not be given a grade simply for volunteering in the community. As with any academic exercise, we grade the outcome, the knowledge and the skills acquired. Students should receive a grade based on the learning they demonstrate, learning enhanced by their service experience. Reflection assignments are the graded, evaluative measure of this service learning experience. When reviewing reflection assignments, ask yourself, did this student more fully understand course content because of his or her work in the community? After the service learning experience, can this student successfully demonstrate an understanding of course learning objectives? Regardless of discipline, regardless of curricula, the overarching goal of service learning pedagogy is to produce a responsible, engaged, well-informed, proactive citizenry. However, it is important to remember that, as scholar Thomas Ehrlich states, we are not promoting a single type of civic or political engagement, but instead urging that the effective operation of social systems and the successful achievement of collective goals demand the time, attention, understanding, and action of all citizens. Long after your course is over, we hope that the experience of service in the community, critical thinking, and personal introspection will have a lasting impact on the lives of our students, an impact they will put in motion toward the common good.